Good morning and welcome to Ed's World, where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. I'm Jay Edgar, and I am joined today, unfortunately, because of some technical issues, by a picture of best-selling author Janey Mack. Janey, welcome to Ed's World.
Hi, Ed.
Did you see the new fuss on Twitter this morning here? This is going to go in before my anecdote, but the Beebs decided that he was going to call out Tom Cruise and try and get him into UFC for an octagon fight.
No, I missed that. But I don't think he'll go because, most of his movie stuff now, he's pretty CG wrinkled free.
No, I know, but it's I,
The Beebs is kind of scrappy. I don't know. I give him an edge.
he's kind of scrappy, but he's also, I think, suffering from the early onset irrelevance.
Well, I don't know. Didn't he just pair up in some kind of rap thing? I thought
Maybe, I'm not sure. I don't listen to pop music, so.
it's not my thing either. So.
Before we get into everything else, I just wanted to share just something that I've been noticing over the past couple of weeks. I've been trying to start the show with a little anecdote every day, or every time we come on. I don't have the show every day yet. We're working on that still, but one of the things that I've been noticing lately is the fact that there are a lot of Twitter polls that are coming out that are supposed to be very left leaning. Um, the I believe it was the House Democrats or the Democrat caucus itself put out a poll a few weeks ago that said, who would you rather have in the Supreme Court, Justice Kavanaugh or Justice Ginsburg? And because of people like me and our retweet function, we tipped the scales on that in an overwhelming fashion towards Justice Kavanaugh until they took it down after 3 hours of it being up because they weren't going to get the result that they wanted. And then just recently here, I saw another Twitter poll that came up from somebody who said, rate how much you want communism. And it was 4 votes that you could have on there, and all 4 of them were positive. And that was a tweet that got ratioed hard because so many people on the right saw that, retweeted it, and put comments in that based on what they actually thought of communism rather than voting in the poll. I don't know if
Well,
that
as
ever
well they
got.
should.
I don't know if that
I
one ever
voted.
got taken down or not, but I'm sorry, I should let you talk.
No, no. I'm sorry. I'm just talking over you. I also voted for Kavanaugh in that poll, and I remember, you know, sending a lot around little snarky tweets going, "Wah wah, where'd it go, DNC?"
My business partner for Freedom Scoop actually remade the poll and said, let's see how this finishes. So I got to get back with him and see actually what his result. No, it wasn't. It wasn't Jake. It was Steve. I'm sorry, Stephen Ignoramus, who is also on the Freedom Scoop network, uh, remade the poll and finished it out. So I got to see how that actually finished out. But that was, they expect something like that, and they expect to have glowing results for their candidate, and then they're all surprised when it doesn't happen.
Well, I'm sorry to say that sounds like an excellent segue into the Carlos Crowder fight.
Yeah, no, I kind of wish we were starting topics at that, but we do have a couple things to go over before we get into topics here. Before we go into topics here, I do have a couple of announcements. As many people who watch my solo videos already know, I am moving down to one solo video per week. I've been looking at the time that I've spent at work, the time that I've been pushing into my solo videos, and the fact that I have a month-old niece that lives far away from me at this point that I've never met yet. So
Mm.
I'm going to rearrange a few things in my life, and I'm going to go down to one solo video a week. I can't cut the solo videos completely out because I know a lot of people like them, and I know it's where I came from. It's how I started on YouTube. It's how I gained my audience. So I don't want to let all of that go. Other announcement that I have coming up here, I will be on the Adventist Millennial podcast coming up in a couple weeks. I'm not sure when Emily plans to release the episode, but I know we will be recording. Not this coming Friday. No, it is this coming Friday. I apologize. Yes, this coming Friday we'll be recording, and I believe it'll be the Friday after that she releases it. So look for that. I'm kind of excited to talk about that. And as a mostly non-religious person, I'm still Christian. I still believe in Christ, but I don't associate with any organized religion. Her question for me is how I see organized religion from the outside. So I think that'll be a good discussion.
Oh yeah.
Well, we've got a packed show today, so I know that we've got to start getting into that here. One of the biggest pieces of news this week, of course, is going to be the Carlos Maza and Steven Crowder fight and the Vox adpocalypse that jumped up. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to see where somebody from the outside sees that. Donald Trump visited the UK this past week, and there were a lot of protests in the UK. There was a lot of news coverage over what was happening to that, and the Donald had a very pleasant visit with the Queen, so we'll talk about that. We always talk about 2020 on this show, and we've got a couple of things that happened there. It looks like there are some claims that some of the Democrats are trying to Me Too Joe Biden, so we'll talk about that, and we'll talk a little bit about what happened with Bernie last year about that. Joe Biden is also struggling with whether he is going to support or deny the Hyde Amendment, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And Gillibrand had a meltdown on Fox News while she was having her interview there. I don't know if you saw it or not, but we will talk a bit about that. It was pretty entertaining to me. The Mueller story never ends, and it never will end. Eric Swalwell swore on Twitter that Mueller was going to be speaking in front of a Congress, and then it appears he scrubbed that tweet from his timeline because I spent quite a while looking for it and couldn't do that. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how the congressional subpoena will work with Mueller being a private citizen and no longer in the DOJ. And Nancy Pelosi talked about wanting to put the president in prison, and we'll talk about what that means, especially given the fact that right now there does not appear to be a charge on the table. New York's favorite socialist, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, swore up and down that birth control should be available over the counter. I have some of my own views on that, just based on some things that I've seen on that, but as a person who will never ever take a birth control pill, I don't have all the answers to that, so we'll talk to the guest a little bit about that and talk about the fact that many libertarians and conservatives swore up and down that this was a conservative idea. Finally, we have some news on the tariff war that's going on with Mexico. It looks like Trump might have won, but there's already conversation about whether or not this was true or not. So we'll talk a little bit about what happened in the last week with Mexico and the border. It is going to be all of this and more on Ed's World. Thanks for watching this over on YouTube and BitChute. Remember, if you haven't subscribed yet, reach down and hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button as you're down there as well. That really helps YouTube know what people should be watching. If you are listening back to this on an audio platform, or you would like to listen to this on an audio platform, we are on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe over there and leave that 5-star rating and a good review if you're over on iTunes. That helps us move up the charts. As always, Ed's World is partnered proudly with the Freedom Scoop Media Group. You can go over there, you can check out this show, you can check out the Generational Gap, and you can check out the Daily Ignoramus with Stephen Ignoramus. There's a lot of good writers there, and we have a lot of good things planned for that as well. Go over there and check that out. Bookmark that page as well if you get over there. After a lengthy introduction here, it's time to talk about the most important part of Ed's World. So, Janey, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Oh, gee. I, oh gosh, where do I start? I live in Arizona, and I have been a writer for about 6 or 7 years. Before that, I was a TV editor and an advertising television editor. And one of the ways I kind of got into writing was that I found out I was having my third kid after my other two were already in that good happy phase where you could go out again and be like normal family, and then we were back in babyland, and same thing happened to a girlfriend of mine at the same time, and we were both losing our minds. So we said, we got to get out, and we need a reason to get out of the house. And so my friend was like, okay, how about this? Let's take a class. What should we do? Let's just take a class. We'll go to this community college. It'll be fun. We'll go 2 weekends a month, and then we'll stop and have cocktails and stuff like that. So that was our plan, and we started. And I said, okay, pick the class, whatever you want, you can have it. And she picked a writing class, and that was it. And that's how we started.
Well, I've read a little bit about, or into one of your books rather. Tell us a little bit how you got into the story of Ginger Snap there, and where this all came from.
Um, the story started from a newspaper article, actually, and I'd read this article about Chicago, and it was talking about how the city of Chicago had leased all the parking meters of Chicago to Saudi Arabia for 100 and I think 125 years. And I just thought that was insane because you couldn't have a parade, you couldn't have an event without permission from the Saudis. And that made me think about meter maids, and maybe there was something there. And then the meter maid story kind of flipped out from there, and that's how it turned out.
Well, thanks for not having spoilers. I'm not that far into it yet, and I know at the end of the show I'm going to make sure that you have a chance to promo those titles, so make sure you keep those up in mind here. If you're satisfied with your bio here, I think it's time for us to jump up into topics. What do you think? Are you
Oh,
ready?
yeah, yeah. More about topics, less about me. That's what I'd go for.
Well, as I mentioned when we were teasing the topics here, right off the top, we're going to talk about one of the biggest ones for those of us on YouTube. Maybe the private sector doesn't really feel the burn off of this, but definitely everybody who's on YouTube does. I know that I had a little bit of a glitch with YouTube that I think was associated with this, but Carlos Maza started calling out Steven Crowder on his show and started calling him out on Twitter. There were calls to get Crowder banned for his famous T-shirt, which I will not quote on this show, unfortunately. But this
Thanks.
started this started definitely going down a path that started affecting other YouTubers, not just political YouTubers. There were gaming channels that were getting taken down, and of course, there were other smaller channels like mine that are not monetized yet, but we were still feeling the heat from that. So, what have you read about this so far? I know you said you got a lot of information while we were off camera before.
Well, let's not get carried away. Don't put the pressure on right now. Wait till a later story, at least. Um, I would say, I've read the greatest article, and it's by Will Chamberlain of, I think, Human Events.
Hmm.
And he talks about kind of the new aristocracy, and that absolutely is what Carlos is, an aristocrat. And the idea is that peasants are not allowed to be rude. And so he can advocate political violence against conservatives, and yet nothing happens to him. He's not deplatformed. He's not called out on it. And why is that? It's because he's in that new elite status of like, look at these things that could oppress me. Now I'm better than you because I'm potentially more oppressed than you. So I think that's what's happening here.
Well, one of the interesting things that I found when I talked about this, when I read about this to do my solo video and to do this video as well, was just the idea of what the difference is exactly. Now, I would not call Crowder a mainstream, but I wouldn't call him a small channel. This is a small channel.
Yeah.
Crowder is kind of bordering on mainstream, but he's still out on his own. I know he's associated with Glenn Beck, so there's a little bit of an idea whether that's mainstream or not. I know that he was an editor and a writer for Fox News before, so he's got the taste of the mainstream, but he's not a mainstream. Vox is independent. And I would say independent adjacent. I wouldn't necessarily say independent because while they are independent, they own their own media firms as well. They have Vice and they've got a few others there. They have I wouldn't say massive interest, but NBC has a huge interest in the company. I don't know if it's controlling or not because I don't know what Vox is worth, but I know NBC has $2 million invested in the firm.
Well, I just remember when Carlos tried to take down PewDiePie, and it didn't really work. That was a. Do you remember all that? Are you a heavy gamer? I'm not necessarily a gamer, but I did, and I still do like PewDiePie, and I never Nobody can make a joke anymore, you know?
Well, and that was one of the things is, I mean, I think I came into internet culture shortly after all of that happened there because I'd heard the name PewDiePie, but I didn't really know who he was. I just subbed to PewDiePie like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Out of, out of nowhere, I just decided to do that. But yeah, I was reading the fact that there was an argument between Maza and PewDiePie before as well, and I think that started the first adpocalypse. Now, this is starting to affect smaller YouTubers as well. This isn't just going through and hitting Crowder. A lot of people were under review over this, whether or not they're eligible for monetization, whether they were having their ads taken down. I know Christensen joked on his show last night and talked about the fact that for now he still has super chats available to him, but he doesn't know how long Maza's going to allow that to happen there. But I mean, even my channel, I had 3 videos go up in automatic private mode, and I didn't set them to private mode. They just went there. Now, of course, I could go right into the video settings and change it back after they were uploaded. But no matter what I did, they went up in private mode. That appears to be fixed now, but I think that was kind of Google showing me that they can do whatever they want with my content. Even though I'm not monetizing, they can't threaten me with that.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good to me, you know? And the thing is, it's kind of like, you know, I think it's one of the fundamental differences between conservatives and liberals, honestly, which is conservatives, hey, you're saying something I don't like, fine, I'm going to go. I don't need to listen to you. Liberals are like, hey, I'm going to change what you're saying or not let you say it. You know, Carlos's whole big thing is like, Crowder spent 2 years harassing me for being gay and Latino, which no, he hasn't. I mean, he's maybe made a couple cracks at you, but the guy has tons of videos where he's sitting at that little table all the time saying, hey, you know, there's only two genders, change my mind. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what his show is. And it's funny and it's irreverent and, you know, a little crude, but that's why I like to watch it.
Oh, I love Crowder's
So,
show. I would be really sad if it went completely behind the paywall because I've got some other things. I'm trying to get into a house and get a permanent studio rather than continuing to rent stuff. And I mean, if I didn't have that hanging over my head, I probably would throw down some money for Blaze and get the Daily Show on that. But I mean, even what I see, he's hilarious, and it's comedy. It's not a serious show.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. It gets to that point where, okay, well, you can't make fun of him because of this, and you can't make fun of her because of that. Oh, but we can make fun of ourselves because we're in this culture, but you can't laugh at our joke. I mean, it's just like, it's getting so stupid. And I don't know, I read in some other article about Carlos, they were talking about him, and they said, look, he's the guy who says, everything has to change. People were mean to me in high school because I was gay. And the guy's like, they might have been, but they probably weren't. You know, you're the kind of guy that's always going to be the kind of guy that has trouble in high school. And I think that there's a lot of truth in that. Even though it kind of was a jokey statement, it's really doesn't have a sense of humor.
Well, that was one of the other things that Maza brought up when he was talking about this as well, was the idea that, I mean, he says that if we were in school, the principal would have come down and taken care of this, but we're not in school. We're in the real world.
Hello, how about we live in America and you can say what you want to say? I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but I feel like there's going to be that moment, and I kind of wish it would get pushed forward a little bit, where these sites have to declare if they're a publisher or just a platform. Because, you know, Twitter has all these rules, but nobody knows what the rules are. The rules aren't written down. And that's not fair. It doesn't feel good. It's weird. And Facebook's the same way. And what good do they do? Because, you know, go on there and see, I've seen terrorist videos. I've seen so much porn. It's unbelievable. And you go, okay, well, Twitter's supposed to be the gatekeeper. That's kind of what they signed on for, I guess, within that law. And they aren't doing anything to make it better. You know, they're not really blocking anything from kids. Kids get to tap on a thing that says, yeah, hey, I'm 13 years old, so I can have a Twitter account. And that's it. There's no blocks. There's no parental aids to block anything. So really, they're not being a gatekeeper when they say that. It's really disingenuous.
It's really
And
interesting to me that you bring up the difference between platform and publisher. As a published author, as published author rather, yourself, I believe that you would be in a unique position to explain the difference.
well, I guess for me being published, my I had an editor, and the editor said, "Hey, these two lines are, I think, are too offensive to be put in there." I wrote this one story. I mean, my writing is pretty light-hearted for the mystery series,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a serial killer make a racist remark, and they said it was too racist, and it was too upsetting, and I was like, because it's really not my bent, and that it was more like a thing to go, oh yeah, look at this is not a good guy.
Right.
And it wasn't me saying the racist remark, it wasn't me meaning the racist remark, it was trying to show that this guy is not a good person. And they said, yeah, you gotta cut that, so I did. But I have a contract with my publisher,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of the agreement, is that the editor really has final say. I mean, I can go back and forth with him and try and convince him to do otherwise, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's online. Who cares? Went out, no big deal. But that's them making decisions, and that's them standing behind the product ultimately, and standing behind me when that book goes on the shelf if something would happen. But I mean, it's different with fiction because it's made up. It's fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So, but to me, when Twitter and Facebook and these big guys are saying, "Hey, you can't have this video talking about this," like, I mean, Dennis Prager. How can you not let Dennis Prager be on? I can't figure that out. I mean, they're learning videos, and they deplatform him. He's demonetized. All this stuff. It's insane. And you're like, okay, well, that's the rules. Then why are all these other people doing this? And all you need is somebody who is incited by other people, and then as a publisher, they would be liable. And as soon as they're liable, that's kind of the kiss of death, because they will just be sued out of existence.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no way they can keep up with, keeping all the terrorist stuff off. And, Antifa has insights. I guess what was that last thing that some Antifa guy set fire to something based on people telling him to go do it? I don't know. I'm not up on it enough. I should have paid more attention to that part.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I don't know as much about it myself, unfortunately.
Well, I just feel like I just kind of puked up a big drift of topic, but I mean, as a publisher, they're liable. As a platform, they're not. But as a platform, they need to have open free speech rules,
Mm-hmm.
because they then have said, hey, we're not a publisher. We're not going to judge. We're not going to pick and choose what's allowed and what's not allowed. As soon as they're picking and choosing what's allowed and what's not allowed, they are also liable if things go wrong.
Well, and it's a good thing, again, that I had you on this show this week to actually talk about that, because, I mean, if you look at what's going on here and you look at the pundits, I mean, yes, we can sit back and listen to Shapiro the lawyer spout off the fact that, oh, well, if they're publisher, then they're going to get sued out of existence, just like you said. But the difference there being is, I mean, you were able to explain what the different step is, rather than Shapiro in his chipmunk buzzsaw voice just saying, oh, well, they'll be a publisher and they'll be sued. And that's the end of the story. So,
well, he's perky. Let's say perky, not buzzsaw. I get it. My kid loves him, so it's like, I'll take whatever conservative bent I can get to combat the school.
one of the things that was brought up to me when I was listening to pundits talk about this, when I was listening, Tim Pool, this is hitting him, I think, harder than it's hitting anybody else right there. But one of the things that kept coming up on this was the fact that it's not just political channels that are getting hit. Everybody is getting reviewed by Google right now. And other channels are getting their monetization taken away from them because they said one wrong thing 10 videos ago, 15 videos, 2 years ago, anything like that.
Yeah, it's getting pretty stupid. I mean, people screw up all the time, and it is some. I don't know who it was that was calling for a moratorium, but they said, "Look, as a politician, if you said it was Scott Adams, and
Okay.
he said, look, if you said something 10 years ago or longer, no one should be able to use that against you anymore." And you know, I kind of got to agree with that. I mean, you're kind of a different person. Everything is changing around you, and that's kind of the sad thing about revisionist history is that they're like, oh, well, that's not nice, we don't want to show that, that's not how this happened. And what it does, it distorts everything because you have no concept of setting and what was driving people to behave in a certain way, or I don't know, sorry.
It reminds me of a line that came from one of the later seasons of How I Met Your Mother, when they were trying to find the last doppelganger, and Ted said, "When we look back at our lives, we're all the doppelgangers of ourselves. We're these people that kind of look like us, but we're completely different people." And I think that plays into part into, people reaching back 10, 15, 20 years into people's yearbooks and trying to find things about them.
Yeah, well, and it really shows up even with texts, because you can be texting someone back and forth and in this weird kind of groove where you're laughing at stuff, and then you go back and look at that conversation a couple days later and you're like, this wasn't even funny, but you both were laughing. It's that kind of phenomenon. And I especially think that happens in comedy, that there's this kind of synthesis with your audience, or you get into that groove and the jokes are expanding and expanding, and then you close the show, you're like, hey, it was great, off to the next one. I mean, you don't go back and review it to go, oh, could this have hurt somebody's feelings that had a black cat instead of a red cat? I don't know. Maybe I should take that line out. Nobody has time for that.
Well, before we jump out of this topic here, I do want to talk just a little bit about where this ends and where this has ended so far. At this point, first off, YouTube did reinstate Crowder's monetization back to him because they found that he didn't violate any of the rules. And then Maza went back and cried some more, and YouTube went back and said, oh, well, okay, now we have found that he violated the rules because Maza cried to us. And then Maza came back and said, well, it's really stupid for the fact that you're going to demonetize him on YouTube because that means nothing. He makes money off of t-shirts and Mug Club and everything else that he does out there, and that is true. He's making all that money off of subscribers, Mug Club, t-shirts, including the t-shirt that YouTube says he can't advertise for on their network anymore because it's offensive.
Wow. It's funny because, there's so much offensive stuff on YouTube. I find, those child porn videos are quite a bit worse than anything Steven Crowder could ever say. And there's just so much bad stuff on there.
I wasn't even aware there were child porn videos on YouTube.
There's like a whole component of like kids doing dressed up, and there was a giant news story on it a while back, and it wasn't like actual child porn, but it was more like
drag kids.
Not that's a whole separate thing, but it was this kind of thing where kids would be in situations and saying certain lines. I mean, it was like a scripted TV show, but it wasn't for children at all, and that was obvious. And YouTube just let it roll, And there were lots of them like that. Strange kind of fetish-based videos are all over that place.
I don't know if I want to know any more about that.
Well, that's what happens when you're friends with a lot of Navy guys. They go, oh my God, look at this terrible thing. Oh, gee, thanks for sending that to me.
Duly noted.
Yeah.
Well, since we've offended everybody talking about Maza and Crowder here, let's talk about the people that were offended over in the UK during the Trump visit. So, over the last 2 weeks, Donald Trump has been out of the country, and he was just over in the UK to talk to the Queen to commemorate Normandy and the invasion of D-Day, and a lot of people started protesting out of that. There were people that drew a giant penis in crops that Trump would have seen as he was touching down in his plane, which, I'm sorry, that's funny. I would have seen that and laughed. There were protests. A lot of
I
the
would have
news.
demonetized him. He's
There were protests. Somebody popped the Trump baby balloon, and everyone said that the Queen was going to throw the Donald out on his ass because she couldn't agree with him. But they appeared to have a very pleasant conversation. He was very cordial throughout the visit, and she spoke highly of him after he left. So, what did you see out of this?
Well, I did see, and I think her Twitter name is actually Based Amy, stabbed the blimp with a scissors. And I thought, you know what? That was pretty great, actually. It's rather ironic to have a knife attack the blimp in London.
A knife
But
attack in London.
yeah, kind of funny. It was actually scissors, but you know, my thing with Trump is that he's a New Yorker, and I had friends who were like, "Oh my God, he just the way he talks, he's so aggressive, and he's just so blustering." And I said, it's kind of a cultural thing there.
Yeah.
And you know, my girlfriend came over from England, and she was like, I can't even believe your president is so uncouth." And of course, she went to New York and was zipping around. And then she calls me up later and she's like, "Hey, I get it. I get why people voted for him. They're all like this here. They're all loud and aggressive and, you know." And she goes, "They don't mean it like that." And I go, "Yeah." So, I don't know. It's hard to kind of judge somebody from far away. But every leader that's met him has really liked him. I think he's really a likable guy, and I think it's hard for people to, especially like the Dems coming up for 2020. It's going to be hard for them to be as likable because he stands for things and he at least believes in what he's saying. And even as we're watching all this run up with the candidates, I mean, what are there, like 25 now? And
23.
23. Well, just wait, they'll be 25.
We'll be talking about that in a bit here, so.
But it's just you watch that happening and you're like, where's the likability factor? I don't know.
Well, one of the things too, and you brought up the New York thing. Obviously, I lived just outside of Boston for 2 years. The school that I went to was actually a mile from the city limits of Boston itself
Hmm.
for 2 years. And yes, you are absolutely right. It's not just a New York thing. It's a whole East Coast thing. They're loud. They're boisterous. They're people of gold. They have hearts of gold, but they're gonna cut you down while they're helping you out. It's just the way that they are.
Yeah, it's not. There's no harm intended with that. That's kind of the piece.
Hmm. Unless you're a Yankees fan in Boston, and then there's harm intended.
Well, neither one of them are my team, so we'll just pass on that.
One of them is mine.
What? I think we should wrap this up. No.
The visit with the Queen did go very well, from what I understand. And again, like I said, the protesters were out there. And in all honesty, there's no Fox News over in England. A lot of our independent channels are blocked over there. So England can't get any news from any independent source. And the majority of U.S. news that they're getting is either coming from something that's recycled for the BBC or is coming from CNN International. So it's not hard to believe that there are so many people out there that were protesting the president or that think that the president is something that he's not while he's over there. But again, it was very cordial. I was really digging the suit that he wore to meet the Queen. I know it's English fashion, it's not our fashion, but it was a good looking suit. It fit him well. He suited well. He charmed the Queen. And again, she spoke highly of him as he was walking out the door. So,
Well, hey, even the British reporters loved his Normandy speech. They couldn't. There were no little sly smacks on it or slapdowns or. They liked it because it was great. It was a great speech.
I have not seen the Normandy speech yet. I actually probably should have done that in prep, but that was the last thing that was on my mind going through that. But how was it?
I thought, he has that power of speech, and that's why his rallies are so amazing. And because there's so many Americans who don't feel the need to get into an argument with a 22-year-old about if they should pay for their own college. And most people are just like, I got a life, I got a job, I got a kid, I got stuff I got to take care of. I don't want to get into something with a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's that piece where you just are wanting to hear somebody say, yeah, America's great. You have equality of opportunity here, which is the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody can guarantee equality of outcome, which is, what all socialists are demanding, but is unattainable. And I don't know, it just seems like you feel good about where we are and what we're doing. And most people feel pretty good about their lives every day. So
Right.
it's kind of refreshing to have someone be positive. I mean, it's Reagan-esque,
Well, I was just a little baby during the Reagan years and living in a union house on top of that, so it was a long time before I started to realize the way that Reagan talked and what it was that he actually stood for.
Well, I lived in Europe for a while, and it just changes your perspective. It's kind of like everybody should try and live in another country before they rip on their own. There's a difference between tearing our country down
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to change things for the better. But, most liberals want a fast change. They want something to change immediately. And those usually aren't the most successful changes.
No, Barack Obama tried to do that for his entire presidency, to do the fast change. And then it just got flicked away with a pen.
Which, thank goodness.
With Normandy there too, what do you think about the relationship that's coming forward with us in Europe, and especially now considering the fact that you said that you have lived there, which I didn't know that coming into this. Because we have bailed them out numerous times. If it wasn't for Normandy, if it wasn't for D-Day, France would be speaking German right now.
Well, yeah. But they're in their own mess, They're running this train into trouble. And everybody always chirps up about, oh, yeah, Denmark's a true socialist country and Sweden's this. But, they're really, those countries are living off of basically oil money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they've been able to enact this. In Denmark right now, they've just elected that, oh, God, I'll never think of her name. But just elected her, who's like, hey, we got a hard line on the no immigration, and we're going to change some of the social programs.
Because they're running out of money.
Because they're running out of money, and people are saying, hey, wait. I paid into this. I want this service. Don't tell me you can't give it to me now. Well,
we're looking at some of that here as well, though.
Absolutely.
Social Security is one of those. I've been paying into Social Security for, how old am I? 23 years?
22?
23 years I've been paying into Social Security. I had to think about how old I was versus when I started
when
working.
You started working at 4?
12.
Yeah.
I'm 35. But yeah, I'm for 23 years I've been paying into Social Security, and they're talking about the fact that there's not going to be anything there for me when I get to that age.
Well, of course they've been saying that for years, but
that's true.
The more programs and the more things we add, the less likely it's going to be there.
Right. And there are others there that are saying again, let's raise the age up to 75, which statistically I think would work. Well, it would bring it back to the way it was intended to be. Let's put it that way.
But some of us think it was a mistake altogether, all along, and I'm one of those. So
I remember the talk in the 90s about Social Security when they were talking about that and the politicians that were dipping into Social Security and never paying it back. I never hear anything about that anymore, though. That kind of weirds me out a little bit that I never hear that anymore.
well, I don't. That one I don't have any response to.
Well, we've completely moved off of Europe at this point. We've talked about our government again, and I think now it might be time to talk about the people that hope that they're going to be executing the laws for our government in the next few years. And that means that it's time to talk about 2020 and everything that is going to be coming up from there. So, we've got a couple of news stories that happened over the presidential candidates on the left. And then I have 3 questions that I always ask all of my guests at the end of the segment here. So, let's start with
Ready.
Joe Biden. Creepy Joe Biden. Now, it
Yes.
appears that Warren and Harris are coming together here and trying to organize advertising, and talks about the fact that Biden has been in a perpetual Me Too and possibly could be in something more serious coming up. I haven't seen a lot of details to this, just a passing comment from the punditry, but I know that there's plenty of material out there for it.
Oh yeah.
Biden is a weird character for me because I've talked about it on the podcast before. I actually intended to write Biden in as a candidate instead of voting for a Republican because I wasn't there yet in 2008 or voting for Barack Obama. I was actually making the decision as I walked to the voting booth whether or not I was going to vote for Biden or leave the top of the ticket blank. Spoiler alert, I left it blank. I couldn't bring myself to vote for your senator. Sorry.
No. Hey, I couldn't either. So. There are a lot of Arizonans who don't think that he is the candidate for statehood that others do.
Have you heard the rant by fellow Phoenician Razor Fist on John McCain?
No.
It's always entertaining.
I'm
Very
gonna-
coarse, but always entertaining.
Yeah, there's a lot of strange things if you really start looking into his background.
Mm-hmm.
But
But let's stay on Biden
Yeah.
here for a second here
Yes.
because, there's, he's said so much stupid stuff. And there are a lot of people out there that say that Biden would coast to the nomination if he just shut up for the next year. And I tend to agree with that. Instead of going up to a 10-year-old girl and saying that you're just as smart as you are good looking.
yeah, kind of is creepy. I mean, when you see all the pictures compiled together, it's pretty stomach turning,
Mm-hmm.
Because most of those women and girls don't look happy that his hands are on them. They have that tight smile of, I don't feel good about this. I'm not happy. And it's a strange thing. You got Melissa Alano running that. I just said her name wrong. Oh, Liz Milano running, or maybe I was thinking of the cookie. I don't know, but that whole Me Too thing, she's kind of taken over as a spokeswoman, whether they intended her to do that or not. And so now she's kind of on Joe Biden's side. I just saw a whole bunch of pictures of them with his arm around her, and
Mm-hmm.
she's saying how great he is, and he's nice, and we shouldn't pay attention to that other stuff that he's been doing, and and she got him to flip on the Hyde Amendment, I think.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that in just a second here.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's a great tease. I do want to make sure that we get into that as well. But the thing with Biden and the thing with the Democrat Party right now, especially with the way that they view the president currently, it's half of the Democrat Party is focused on electability. They want somebody that's actually going to be electable no matter where he stands. They want to make sure that somebody can get up there and take the president out so they can put him in prison for not being a politician making it to the presidency. I don't know what they want to do with that. We'll talk about that
Yeah.
at the end of the podcast. But the other half of that, and I think this is where the Me Too thing is coming with him, and some of the infighting that comes from the Democrat Party, is the fact that Joe Biden does not toe the progressive agenda like many of the other people want to push into any of this. The reason that I wanted to write Biden in at the top was because he is a union friendly Democrat. He's a business friendly Democrat, and that is what I grew up in, and that's what a lot of people who jumped ship from the Democrat Party and voted for Trump are looking for, is somebody who's going to be friendly to the union, because a lot of them are union workers. The progressive agenda and the union agenda do not mesh well.
No, not at all. Actually, it's going to be a tough race because the party, I think, is really, really fighting for its identity. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you got all these young socialists popping up and wanting to take rights away from men, and you know, it's. I mean, I think it was Hickenlooper who was giving a speech and got booed off the stage when he said, you know, Medicare for all is not the solution, and they just. I mean, he couldn't overcome that, and they don't even want to listen. So that's where I think a lot of those candidates are going to have a hard time, because the more, I don't know, I want to say normalized, but you know, pro-American guys who are like, hey, you know, some things are good, but we're not a socialist country. Socialism does not work and it's bad. I mean, you know, all the young guns are like, oh, screw you, get out. We don't want you here.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're looking at somebody who's very electable, somebody who could make it. I'm not completely worried about the fact that Biden could get on the stage. I think there's enough dirt on him that Trump could go onto that, but he's the one I'm the most worried about.
Well, I don't know. It's none of them are going to have an easy road. I gotta say, I think Joe is more likable,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I think it's the is it Montana. He's a pretty likable guy too, but my God, you know, some of these other people are just like nails on a chalkboard. Just their delivery and their kind of self-involvement, like Pete and Beto. I mean, my gosh, those guys are like, they drive me crazy when they talk. And
Beto and his magic dirt.
yeah, it's Magic Dirt and the breakfast pizza controversy, and I don't know.
Oh, I didn't know about the breakfast pizza controversy. That one's news to me.
Well, I think was it Joni Ernst, who's the Iowa senator, I think.
Yes.
He took a picture of himself eating pizza in the car out in front of this Iowa restaurant that serves breakfast pizza.
Okay.
And he said, I'm eating breakfast pizza," or he made it seem as though he was eating pizza from the restaurant. But of course he wasn't, because the breakfast pizza, as all Iowans pointed out, does not contain marinara sauce. So
Hmm.
and breakfast pizza has scrambled eggs. So there's like a whole, but it's just that weird kind of, look at me, I'm at the dentist, I'm getting a haircut, I'm normal, I'm skateboarding, and I'm kind of like, oh gosh, that's not normal. Nobody wants to watch someone else go to the dentist or, you know, get a haircut. That's weird.
Yeah, that it is. And Pete is
So,
kind of the same way. He had a shot for a little while and he was doing very well. But he's kind of tapering off as well. Warren was coming back up for a little while, but she's tapering off. I was just looking at RCP for a bit before we started our conversation here. Those polls are crazy.
yeah, aren't they? I mean, my favorite is, I like to go look at the Las Vegas sports betting odds, see what see what they're rolling around in. You know, they got people who are paying attention. So I don't know. That's kind of my odds-on thing to do. So far, most of them have Harris or Biden running at the top. You know, beneath Trump. I mean, they're still like plus 400, and Trump is, you know, minus 150. odds. Sorry. I don't know if you're much of a gambler, but
I am. No, I get it
sure.
entirely. So let's talk a bit about, because we talked about it before,
Mhm.
Biden's struggling with the Hyde Amendment.
Yeah.
Biden
Well,
talked back in the 90s when he was in the Senate, and he supported the Hyde Amendment, saying that abortion clinics cannot use public funding to commit abortion. They can use it for other services as a subsidy or to try and offset costs, but they cannot use it directly for abortion. If they are going to use it for abortion, they have to hide it and use the money that they would have used for something else to do that. And now, after pressure from Alyssa Milano, as you said before, now Biden is changing over on that, and now he's saying that he's in favor of that. So, since you brought that
well,
up, continue on.
mhm. Oh, well, I think he's, I think his hands are tied. You got all these women who are like, yeah, be able to pull it all the way to the end. And you know, it's a really, really tough issue. But my God, this some of these candidates are just ghoulish, you know, about what's right and what's wrong. And I think a lot of people are like, yeah, make your choice. And, nobody wants to be in that situation, obviously. And nobody wants to judge anybody about what they would do in that situation because they're not in it. But there is that thing where it's like a lot of people don't agree that this is a good thing. And it's kind of weird that they're looking at people like AOC and Kamala and everybody saying yes, and Warren, that's women's right, they get to have it last up to the last second. But most people polling left and right don't think it's that great. I think like 22 weeks is put the kibosh on it there. And that's I think they just had a baby on Drudge that was the size of an apple and has survived.
Hmm.
So it's a tough call, and I don't think he can afford to alienate the base when he's running against these women who are so heavy with this. It's hard to. I think the Democrats are held hostage by the progressives, and they can't figure out what to do about it.
Oh yeah, well, I mean that's the complete dynamic between Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and Nancy Pelosi. Definitely, that woman is held hostage by the progressive movement at this point. To
Yeah,
touch, go ahead.
well, I just remember AOC threw out a tweet the other day. Like, there's too many men in this race, and I don't know who she said it to, but she said, sashay away, and it was kind of like, who are you to tell somebody else, they shouldn't be running? I mean, look, there's way too many people running, fact, but you know, you let the voters decide that. You don't publicly tell someone else don't do that unless you have other motivations there.
That woman is going to get primaried, I promise.
I hope you're right.
Well, I mean, nobody in New York 14 is ever going to vote ours. So, I mean, they talk
Right.
about the Republican that's running to try and beat her out in 2020. I'm like, that's never going to happen. Change your focus. And yeah,
Yeah.
I
Change the letter by your name to a D. You got a shot.
I'm thinking after all the embarrassment that Cortez has put against Nancy, I'm sure Pelosi's got someone out there to run against her in the primary challenge.
Well, yeah, I hope so.
I do too. I want to touch back to this Hyde Amendment thing, and I don't want
Mhm.
to go through policy so much on abortion because that's been talked to death at this point.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a completely different idea of what's viable, what's a human life, and whatnot. But I want to talk about the flip flop for a second. The fact that Biden is changing his mind here because I'm looking back at the 2008 primary race, and I'm looking at this primary race as well. I'm looking, and one of the things I do want to focus on is Hillary Clinton in '08 versus Hillary Clinton in 16, because Clinton was, like Biden, a very union friendly, very business friendly Democrat in 2008. She was the hands on winner because of her ties to the business and the union. She wasn't a very socialist. She was safe, legal, and rare, not progressive, not Medicare for all. She was for the workers, was her main platform, and we all thought that was going to carry her to victory. When she was beaten by Barack Obama, who was a step below a socialist, and she was running so hard that she had to take superdelegates to get the nomination against Bernie Sanders, who was an avowed socialist, she started to change her platform and flip flop on her ideas and become a socialist. I really truly think that's what cost her the 2016 race. And I look at Biden now starting to flip flop on some of the stuff that he's on record on, and I have to wonder if that's not going to do the same thing for him.
You know what? I don't think so. Because first of all, he's going to have to flip flop on the whole shotgun thing. He's going to have to address his thing where he was talking about a shotgun. Like, I think there's multiple quotes of him doing it. He's on TV talking about, yeah, just have a shotgun and pop some guy twice in the chest if he breaks in my house, which is fine if you're conservative, but not if you're a liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know it's going to be like Warren and the crew are going to go after him for that.
Yeah.
So there's that piece. And then there's going to be the next piece of the Hyde Amendment. I mean, so those are weaknesses within his own party. So if he can say, yeah, I was hanging out with Melissa or Alyssa Milano, and now I understand the error of my ways, and I'm this, they're going to say, okay. And there's going to be some people who will reluctantly go along with that because they think he's their only shot.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be other people who are like, finally, he figured it out. So,
well, I'm not so concerned about the primary race because I do think he's going to make it to the end of that. But I'm talking like on the debate stage with Trump and on general election day. I think that's going to cost him because a lot of people are jumping onto his camp because he's for all these union friendly ideas, and he is a classic business Democrat. But now they don't. Now that he's changing, he's going to throw a lot of people off, just like Hillary did.
Well, I don't know. He has to make it through the primaries first. And that is going to be, my God, a circus, to say the least.
This is the best time to have a political podcast, trust me.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Let's talk a little bit about Gillibrand and her Fox News meltdown. So, Gillibrand was on Fox News doing a town hall. We've talked about the idea of Democrats doing town halls and reaching across the aisle to Fox News to try and garner more voters. And we all looked at the fact that Gillibrand was going to do that, and that was going to be a good strategy for her. But instead, towards the end of her town hall, she took a question on abortion from somebody who was in attendance and suddenly decided to turn on the network and tell everybody that right before the State of the Union, Fox News spent 6 whole hours talking about infanticide, and that whipped the country up into a frenzy. Let's not talk about the 23 hours a day of coverage of the Russia case that was on MSNBC, of course, but Chris Wallace turned around and told her that it was not very polite for her to do that while she was on their network. But of course, she was doing so to win political points with her supporters and the Democrat Party. So, my first question there is: did you see the meltdown?
Yes.
Did you laugh?
No, because you know what? It just felt so staged to me. She was waiting and waiting and waiting to pull that out. That. And I don't know that she did herself any favors. It's like everybody always says, it's hard to be a woman and run because you're either a bitch or you're, whatever. But there's a lot of people who aren't likable. And there is that piece where people don't like you. And my God, you come on Fox, you're doing a town hall. So most of your viewers, sorry to say, are going to be Fox viewers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they see her, and they see her come over, and it's basically like you invite her to a party. She comes over, and she's like, hey, your curtains are ugly and your kids suck. That's not nice. So makes her not likable to me.
I love
And
that
it also
analogy.
feels like, and so I think like it really didn't help her because she was hoping to get that pop so that they could run those little clips on MSNBC and CM, whatever,
Hmm.
of her like, look at how tough she is, and look at she can go against Chris Wallace, and yay for her. And but it didn't buy her as much dis as much pro, because people who already like her are going to be like, she's the person for me, let's go. And anybody who doesn't like her is really going to not like her even more. I don't know.
Well, I'm afraid that we can probably limit out the people that like her out of this because Jill Brand is currently polling just a touch above 0%. So I do think a part of that did come from the fact that this is nothing to lose. So
Yeah.
score some cheap political points that you can use on your next Senate run.
You know, some of these people should get out before that big debate, I think.
Oh, I can't wait for Super Tuesday.
it's gonna, it's gonna be you know, interesting.
I'm taking the first debate night off from work, and I'm
Oh
just going to
yeah.
be glued to my computer. I don't have cable here, so.
Oh, that's gonna be the most fun ever on Twitter. That's it.
So, there are three questions that I always ask my guests at the end
Okay.
of this segment here. They're all very similar, and they all involve who ends up at the end of the stage. So, my first question for you, and I think we can all agree on this at this point still, even though the polling is changing, is by statistics, make an educated guess as to who is going to be the Democrat nominee based on the data that we have this particular week.
Well, I would say Biden.
Uh, Pretty standard at this point because he's still the top polling person and he still has that centrist likability.
Yep.
So now, and I assume that you're more conservative, but based on policy, based on um, what you would accept if you had to accept a Democrat as the president, which candidate that's currently running right now would you like to see run against Trump? If you had to have a
Wait.
Democrat in office.
Okay. If I had, let's see. Um, Biden, I don't think would be bad, only because I don't think he's going to stir the pot much. He'd be more likely to stay the course than to really, do an Obama and start writing stuff in and trying to change the world in 4 days, that kind of thing.
Right.
And I mean, I could go way out and say, hey, who's it? Alaska? Is it Mike Gravel?
Yep.
I mean, he promises no war. We're going to pull out of everything and be an isolationist. Okay, well, I'm kind of cool with that. So,
That's Tulsi's platform too, actually.
and Tulsi, I kind of like her. I think she's engaging. I get a likability vibe from her. There's a lot of things I don't agree with her on, but I was kind of liking Andrew Yang too, because he has a lot of reasonable solutions,
Mm-hmm.
but he he doesn't quite follow all the way through. There was that shooting in Minneapolis where a police officer shot a woman, and he was on trial, and he ended up getting 12 years for murder. And so Yang put out this big thing about possible racial motivations are behind why he has this. And it was just kind of like, either step up and say, yeah, you're agreeing with that, but don't do the wishy-washy thing of like trying to incite a racist call to order without of saying like, oh, these people are racist, that's why this happened, we got to step up with this. I mean, own it. If you believe that, if you read over the details of the case, which I don't think you did, because I don't really see it. I mean, the verdict was how I thought it should have been. So, I mean, I'm on board with that, but I don't know. So, I mean, some of those, but he seems, financially, he seems like he's all right. I mean, none of these guys are going in my direction.
Right.
So it's hard to, go out there and really judge them as what I want, because most of them have several things that I really, really disagree on. So that's enough to turn me off.
Okay. Last question, of course, is pure entertainment value. No statistics, no policy, no anything.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you want to see on that Lincoln Douglas debate stage across from the Donald?
Well, for fun,
Yeah,
I
pure
would say
entertainment.
Bernie, Pete, and O'Rourke. Any one of those I would take,
Defend.
because I I think I think he would just crush him. And as a Trump supporter, I think that would be fun. Which I know it doesn't sound very nice, but
Oh, I say every week that I want to see Bernie and Trump go back and argue back and forth in New York accents.
see, you feel me,
Yeah.
brother.
Well, there's a lot of talk that's moving in the other situation that threatens to try and unseat our current president right now, including a tweet that's been scrubbed from Twitter at this point. So let's take some time and talk about Mueller here. We're running a bit long here, but I think these last three are going to be some quick hitters. So, Swalwell was having a tweet conversation back and forth, and he swore that when somebody suggested that Congress talk to Robert Mueller, that Congress will be talking to Robert Mueller. That tweet has since disappeared, but that brings up the idea of, to me, I mean, how does congressional subpoena work with a private citizen? And what are they going to get out of him that they didn't get out of the 400-page report or the 8-minute retirement speech that Robert Mueller put up in front of us?
Well, I know that the House rules provide that a House committee or subcommittee is required to seek authorization of the full House prior to enforcing a subpoena. So maybe, Eric read that and realized that probably wouldn't happen.
Where do you think that they stand on this right now? Because I know a lot of people said that Mueller was kind of winking and nodding over to Congress to say, hey, go ahead, impeach now. Go get him. Go fetch.
I don't think he was. I mean, I really don't think he was doing that. And I think it was end of May. He tweeted out something about, or he expressed his reticence to testifying.
Right.
That's basically him saying, "Yeah, I'm not going to do it, and you're not going to make me." That was a warning to Eric, who of course didn't notice that. So I don't think he's going to do it, and I'd be surprised if he does. I don't think it's a good idea for on the Democrat side, because it's that kind of re-energized Clinton's whole mess. As soon as it got to the impeachment thing, everybody was like, "Hey, he's not that bad of a guy. Come on." That's when it's just everybody's so sick of this. I am. I'm sick of the coverage. I'm sick of people talking about it. Nobody has anything new to say. We're all waiting for something to happen, and yet pretty much nothing happens.
Well, I'm kind of impressed by the idea that a lot of us are getting our civics lessons again. Some of us actually took civics when we were in middle school, but it appears a lot of the country didn't. And I mean, we're starting to see how all of this process works. Whether
Yeah,
or not it's going to
absolutely.
happen, but we're actually learning how this has to happen in order to do things. You can't just impeach somebody because you don't like him. There actually has to be something underlying to do so.
Yeah, thank God for that. But that's kind of that, which ties into Carlos, ties us right back. It's that thing of, I don't like you, so I don't want you to be able to make money on YouTube. I don't want you to be able to have this. I don't want you to be the president. I don't want people to vote for you. I mean, it's feels, not facts.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's the conversation that's, you listen to the progressives on Twitter because Trump put a stop to their progressive agenda. They want to talk about Donald Trump going to prison. That's one of the more trending things. It was trending this morning. Hashtag Trump is worse than Nixon. And that's only because Nixon's not in office right now, and Trump is. I remember when Bush Sr. was worse than Nixon. I remember when Bush Jr. was worse than Nixon. It's a moving goalpost on that point, but in order, I think, to quell some of the impeachment happy people on the left, Nancy Pelosi started talking slightly incoherently about the fact that she wants to see the president in prison. I heard Rush talking about this a little bit that same morning that it happened, and I don't. This is going to be the third show in the row I've given the guy credit for. I don't want to give him too much credit because I think he's a little bit too much of a shepherd and leading too many people and not letting them think for themselves. But he's absolutely right. It's all these tin pot dictators like Kim Jong Un, like the leaders of Iran. It's people like Hitler way back in the day that wanted to imprison their political dissidents rather than trying to engage with them in the battle of ideas. And this is the
Yeah.
same idea because Pelosi is like the third highest member of the government. There are people that say she's the second most powerful member of the government. And she wants to put her political enemy into prison.
You know what? I think she just says whatever she says.
Well,
I
yeah,
think that after the last, when she said stuff about Trump while he was in the UK and he came back and called her Nervous Nancy. My God, I can't look at her now and watch her do that mouth thing without thinking she's nervous. It's indelible, I mean,
I do.
it's and I don't know how much of that is a distraction of hers. Let's talk about him going to prison. That takes the pressure off of her getting him impeached because I think the higher ups, the old school Dems, don't think that impeachment is the right answer. It'll make him more of a hero to his base.
Yeah, absolutely will.
And the other people don't. The younger young guns, they don't even care. They're like, let's do it. We can do it. And they got all that energy and enthusiasm and good for them. But I mean, I think that's why Pelosi's doing this because I don't think she thinks it would happen. And she's very carefully wording it like, I would like to see him in. Well, sure. There's a lot of people I would like to see in prison who haven't done anything wrong. So,
Well, and
that's
yeah,
how I look at it.
you touch on the proper point to that is a lot of this is to try and quell the impeachment happy young guns out there because they're chomping at the bit. Nancy Pelosi controls the impeachment. She has to bring it to the floor. She has to get the votes to the floor, and I don't think the votes are there to start the articles of impeachment. And I also don't think that Pelosi thinks that it's a good idea because what's going to happen in the Senate if they do the investigation? What
Yeah,
Republican senator wants to go back to his district and say, yeah, I voted to convict the president?
not many.
That is not only a senator that's not going to be able to get reelected, that's a senator that's not going to be able to go home.
Right.
Oh, I guess I have to go live in California now, where they hate me even more.
Yeah. You can.
So that's what I see in that. I mean, it's a dangerous thought, of course, because it'll rile up the base and try and make the next crop of people elected believe that it's okay to put your political opponents into prison. But for reasons that I think we know, I think yeah, this is just trying to quell the base and shut them up for a while.
Yeah. I don't see anybody that is on the right that thinks very highly of Nancy. So I don't think they're really bothered by what she says. And it's just kind of a knee jerk, but she is pulling away from impeachment by saying, "Oh yeah, let's try and put him in prison."
Hmm. Well, we've brought up the young guns that want to see the impeachment here. So let's talk about a statement from one of the young guns that want to see impeachment and something else that she's brought up. I think my transition game is strong this week. What do you think?
Working for me.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez put out a tweet saying that birth control should be available over the counter. One of the things that made this an interesting topic for me was the fact that I didn't read this from her herself. I follow her, of course, because I follow politics, and I actually tried to get her on my show when she was first got into the primary race for all of this before I knew what everything she was about. But I saw this come from a libertarian podcast host, who's a friend of mine, of course, saying that this was a conservative idea. And I do have some mixed thoughts on the idea of whether or not this is something that should be, but I don't know if you saw this in the show notes or not, but I really appreciate the fact that there's a woman talking to me when this story came up in the news, because I am guaranteed never to take one of those pills.
Well, it's one of those interesting ideas because it's like the allergy pill thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's how it's presented, right? And in a free market system, yeah, you should be able to go do that. But the reality of birth control pills, it's you're putting artificial hormones into your body, and they aren't harmless, and so selling them over the counter kind of implies that they're harmless. There's blood clots and increasing suicidal thoughts and all kinds of stuff like that. And if you talk to women who've gone on the pill, they've usually gone on 3 or 4 different ones before they found the right one for them. And there is that kind of makes you go, well, don't you think you should be talking to someone who knows what's going on, like a doctor, about it?
And that's exactly the point that I wanted to get to when I was talking about this. I will never take one of those pills myself. I have been engaged a couple of times, and I've been around this before, and I was engaged young enough that the idea of going on the pill for the first time was an idea that came up at the time for me. My second fiance took 3 or 4 tries before she found one that actually worked for her and didn't completely drive her insane.
Yeah. That must have been fun for you.
And the first one couldn't take any, and she wound up, even up until for her entire life, she couldn't take any birth control pills because they messed her up so badly. She couldn't use any of it at all, and that was under the direction of a doctor. One of the other things that
right.
The accessibility of over the counter I'm okay with. Cortez was trying to talk about the accessibility thing for it, and I'm all for that. Let's go ahead and have that accessibility there. That's a good thing in my eyes. But as far as having that medicine in your body, I think you should be able to consult, or should have to consult with your doctor, just so there's a medical record there of what medication that you're taking and what could happen to you in an emergency, like if you get in a car accident or something, and how medicines are going to react with that.
Well, or even take it to a lower level than that. Most doctors give you a prescription for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're on a pill that you like, or you have to call in at 6 months and have them renew it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And you should be going in once a year for a yearly anyway. So in a way, having to have a prescription makes you go in, makes you get checked out, makes you have some kind of conversation about this. So I think that's actually more detrimental to women to have it sold over the counter, because first of all, you're not going to necessarily take it as seriously as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, how many women are going to start taking it, be okay with the facts, and not go in and not get checked out normally on a regular basis? I mean, sure, it's their choice to, go in and get checked out or not, but, it's almost like a tacit agreement saying, yeah, you're going to be fine, only go to your doctor when you have a problem.
Right.
So, I don't know. That's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah. No, and again, I appreciate the free market idea of this. I really do. that's that's where I think a lot of people like Brady Leonard were going with the fact that it's a conservative idea because, you're going to go through, you're going to buy the one over the counter, you're going to try it, and if you have a hormonal problem, you're going to go with something else. The free market is going to do that, but again, if you're getting the prescription from there, it's on your medical record, and if you get hit by a train, God forbid, they'll know what medications you're on right away because they'll have access to your medical record.
Right. It's a, you know, it's one of those strange situations where I don't even really think it's that big of a hassle. And maybe I'm just in outer space on this, but
Well, you would know better than I would.
I mean, if you sell them over the counter, so what? You're going to have a 14-year-old go in there and start taking these and maybe skip 3 or 4 days and not read the directions close enough, or it's already thrown the box away. So they think, okay, I'll take 3 or 4 today. I mean, and what
Well,
happens when they are on the pill that doesn't work for them? Do they throw it away? Do they run it down the sink? I mean, there's all those chemicals are leaching into the earth. And
mhm.
that's not normally my argument, but I mean, they're going somewhere. I mean, they were testing water supply all over the place, talking about so many hormonal components now showing up.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's a part of it. And I do think that that's a part of the reason that Cortez is bringing this up as well is the idea that okay, this should be more accessible for young women that don't want to have the conversation with their parents. I can't speculate, of course. I can't answer for her, but I do believe that that's going to be a component of this.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because a 14-year-old isn't able or ready to make life decisions, and yeah, you hope kids have good parents, but you have to assume that I don't know. It's a that's a tough one to argue because I don't think kids should be able to make those decisions on their own.
And lastly, there comes the idea that comes out of the libertarian in me the fact that this shouldn't be a decision that's made in D.C. anyway.
Yeah, I would agree that's a state decision at least.
Absolutely. Municipality, even, maybe. Because there's licensing and everything else that goes along with something like that, I'm sure.
Yeah, the interesting part is like I would like to know what the manufacturers think about this idea because I'm guessing they're not going to be high on it.
Well, there's two sides to that. There's the liability that comes back if something goes wrong and the right lawyer gets a hold of it. But
Yep.
the other side of it that's they see dollar signs because it's more readily available.
Well, you're assuming that people are going to take them responsibly, and if they don't, what are they going to get sued for? Sued for not having good enough directions? All those kind of weird petty lawsuits that just chink away. I can't see that most of those drug companies are going to think that that's a good idea. I just can't. I just can't see it that way.
Huh? That is a fair point. I have one more topic here, so uh, let's
All right.
let's move on over into Mexico and the border crisis that's continuing to go on there. Now, Christensen said that he had to eat some crow on that. I was actually just listening to their show while I was driving around here before we started recording, and there were mixed feelings on the idea of what the president decided to do as far as tariffs went. Lokes and I talked about this last week when he was on the show, and we were kind of both in favor of the idea because it seemed like the tariffs were being used to come to a political end. And this is something that no matter what, the U.S. was going to walk away and win. And it seems that they won quicker than anybody thought that they were going to, and that Mexico has folded on the idea that they don't want to have any tariffs put on their goods, and they will jump up and do whatever it takes to prevent this new tariff plan. How much have you seen on this?
Um, some. I mean, I think it. I I was not surprised. I was surprised that there were so many people that were surprised.
I didn't think it was going to happen that fast. I knew it was going to happen. I did not think it was going to happen that fast. I didn't think
I
that
don't.
the president down there was going to say, "Oh no, 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 Mr. Trump, no, we'll play ball."
Well, I think what drives him are the companies.
Hmm.
And as soon as it started to come around that this is how much those tariffs are going to cost you, and this is what it's going to do, and everything's going to slow down. All those guys look at is lost revenue, and they go talk to him and say, "No, no, no, cannot have this," and he has to listen.
This is probably a bigger deal for someone that lives over in Arizona because I mean you're right on the border. I mean we've got some issues with illegal immigration up here because of the idea of it's just like when you escape from prison, you're not going to hang around outside the prison.
Right.
But
Although, we have California, Arizona. We're all right there.
mhm.
Texas, yeah. So, you know, you got to wonder too how unhappy if the Mexican nationals been with Guatemalans and El Salvadorians and all these people coming across.
Mhm.
You know, it's not to say that everybody commits a crime or does anything bad, but there's going to be a couple bad apples in every caravan that's swooping by,
Yeah, especially with the size that they are.
and they're going to be people that need stuff. And when you're really, really desperate and you're really needy, maybe you don't act like a very nice person. So, it's that kind of a situation where I see there could be a lot of relief that the Mexicans can blame Trump, can blame America, and say, "Hey, we can't let you in. They're going to ruin us. Sorry." I don't know. That's just like a little.
Well, that was an interesting idea that Chris brought up when we did the last show as well, is the fact that a lot of this and a lot of the illegal immigration that is happening now is not necessarily people coming from Mexico to the United States. Yes, there is a lot of that because Mexico is in its own type of bad situation. But we have these massive caravans that are moving across Mexico with the express intent of storming the U.S. border and coming over to the United States. We have people trying to sneak across. We have people that are coming to the port of entry, but a lot of them, yes, are going by truck, by bus, by foot, by donkey, by any sort of means to get across Mexico and get into the United States. Part of that does, or rather, part of that comes from the fact that they don't want to be in. I mean, they can claim asylum in Mexico, but they don't want to.
Right.
And the Guatemalan border is pretty wide open at this point.
Well, and wasn't it like in April, the Congolese migrants were tested, I think they had like 10 positive for Ebola.
Yeah, because the Ebola thing is just it's massive as well, and it's easier to get into Central America than it is to the U.S. because they're not going to test for anything in Central America.
Well, and they're not going to test in the U.S. if you get in illegally either. Yeah, that's
Right, but if you come through a port of entry, they will.
right.
So I don't know. Part of the agreement that came out of this, of course, was Mexico is putting soldiers down at their Guatemalan border, which is considerably smaller and easier to patrol, but they're
Hmm.
putting soldiers in to try and keep the Honduran caravans from coming through Mexico and getting to the U.S. to begin with. And they're loosening some of their restrictions to try and encourage more people to seek asylum in Mexico rather than making it all the way to the United States.
And wasn't there just something about how the president of Mexico said that they uncovered, I think, 75 sources of money for these migrants.
I don't know if it was that many, but yes, I know that they were uncovering funding that was trying to help push these caravans through.
Yeah, and they weren't going to release any of that information, but that they knew who it was now, or at least where some of these sources were, and they were going to try and close them down on their own.
I'm a little on the fence about the idea that they're not going to release any of that because, I mean, the FBI and CIA probably have a lot more assets to try and get this shut down. I
Exactly.
wonder.
But maybe it's I don't know.
I wonder if some of this isn't coming internally from Mexico then, and they're trying to hide it and cover it up. That's an interesting idea.
So it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, hey, we only get what we get from the news, right?
That's true, and there are a lot of us like me that are trying to get more of it out of the news, but we have our own sources. And there are people like Tim Pool who's making a van. He's going to live in a van and go do on-site reporting, which is amazing.
Yeah, I like him. I think he's a good guy. So he's definitely someone that I tune into and will tune into more.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what comes up out of this van and what kind of on-the-ground reporting he does and how fast NBC tries to get him shut down.
I'm guessing fast. He'll probably be cut from YouTube first.
Well, he's already got a plan for once he's cut for YouTube. I don't know if you've seen any of those videos that came up on the Maza argument, but if he gets cut from YouTube, he's gonna go back to the south side of Chicago and start skateboarding again.
Well, I won't make the kind of statement about like commitment level to news, but it's stuff has got to change between the platform and the publishing thing. It's eventually it's going to happen. I just wish it would happen sooner than later. So, nobody wants to be working hard and not knowing the rules. I mean, America's kind of always
Absolutely.
been about fair playing. We're a fair play, kind of do your best and you get what you get kind of place. And I don't know. That's
Well, it's an interesting idea with Poole because he could go down to Mexico and I don't know if he could get into Mexico and get back into the U.S. But he could go down to Mexico. He could go down to the border and report on this. And he doesn't have anywhere near the kind of money wrapped up in his van as NBC has wrapped up first two in their first two journalists every year.
oh yeah.
And it's the same idea that Styx keeps bringing up I think every fourth day he brings up the idea. It's an idea that I've had on this show as well. I mean, I can't go out and report. I can only reprocess the facts that are presented to me because I don't have the kind of financial stability to get out there and do on the ground reporting. But as far as presenting the facts and presenting the opinions and editorials that go along with it, I'm doing better than NBC is doing with facts. With a $50 webcam, a $30 webcam next to it, and a $20 microphone.
Ooh, you're a big spender. But that's part of the news' trouble, is that equipment still gets the message out.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of can't compete with that. They've moved from true journalists to opinion shapers.
Yeah.
And now people can see everything and we're making our own choice. So, present it as it is or don't present it at all. I mean, it's kind of the vibe I'm getting.
Absolutely. And I've tried to, be on both sides of the fence because I grew up on the left. I grew up in a Democrat household. And I came to the Republican side on my own. And I'm not even 100% sure I'm fully into it because I look at the neocons, and I've got a cousin that worships at the feet of neocons. But I look at the neocons and I can't be there either. I just want to be left alone. I want more decisions being made at the state government level and less of them being made in D.C.
Yeah, exactly. I'm right with you.
Well, and it's, again, we look at geographics here because you're in Arizona. How much further is it for you to go to D.C. and argue your case than it is even for me?
Right.
It's a longer and a lot more expensive plane ride for you to get there than it is for me to get there. I mean, it's a 10-hour drive for me.
Well, and what change are we going to enact as a single person? You know,
I'm not gonna lie, I thought about running. My girlfriend broke up with me, and I had no idea where I was going to be living when election time came up. Otherwise, I probably would have been on the ticket in Wisconsin last year.
well, that would have been fun to see.
I don't think I had the name recognition yet, but you know what I'm doing with Freedom Scoop now, and the way that Jake is trying to get all of our names out there. I mean, I could possibly have a fighting chance in 2020 or 2022.
Well, I'll certainly retweet you. I'm, I'm not going to, vote twice or anything, but
Well, we are way off topic at this point here, so. And we're at 95 minutes, so I think.
oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
No, more
I'm
content is
pretty
better. It's great
chatty.
for it is great for the listeners to get more content than less, but I think it's time to run through the outro. And since everything is so negative in politics and in news, and there's so much infighting between newscasters and independent journalists, as we saw at the beginning of this show, we always try to end the show on a positive note. So I will ask you to describe something that brings you great joy. So tell us about a hobby that you have that has nothing to do with politics or your work. It could be an album that you're listening to, a good book that you've picked up, maybe a video game that you've seen, just something that helps you unwind.
Well, I saw this great show on Netflix called It's Bruno. And that show has popped me up. I mean, I think it's a lot of fun, and it's not a high budget production, and there's a lot of laughs and a lot of tension in it. So it's really really well done, and it's fun and it's new, and it's always good to see new things that make you think differently about TV and miniseries and things like that.
That's great. I'm actually going to have to put that on my watch list here.
It's hard because I read, but I'm reading books that my friends have written that aren't getting published yet. That's like one thing to unwind with. And I'm working on building a website for me and my partner, which is technically now relegated to my hobby, but it's not something I like and I want to outsource. So, it's when you're in it, you're just in it all over. I mean, I'm sure you have to kind of be like that with your podcast.
Absolutely.
You're listening to other podcasts, but you're also evaluating what they're doing and thinking about ways that they're doing things. That should you be modernizing? Should you be doing this? Should you be on this platform? It's kind of like you never truly get away from it when it's a creative endeavor, I don't think.
No, absolutely. And that is part of the reason that I said at the beginning of the show I'm going down to one solo video a week, is so I have some time to do other things and unwind. Because, once
Yeah.
you're in it, you're in it.
And that's even my writing partner, who we just finished our first book together, and it was his first book that he finished. He's like, now I look for plot lines and character arc, and you're waiting for kind of story beats and momentum, and it's all stuff that you're not really aware of when you're watching it before, but you kind of walk away going, oh, that was a great movie, or this was a great scene. And after you start working on it on that end, then you also see that. But you eventually derive a different type of enjoyment for seeing it done really, really well. And that's kind of a cool creative evolution, I guess.
It is. But I think it's time for us to get out of here and get our audience on with the rest of their day. Once again, thanks for watching this show. If you want to finish out this conversation, you can comment in the comment section below this video if you're watching on YouTube. I always comment back. Or you can finish the conversation by emailing me, edsblogtwitter@gmail.com, or on my Twitter, edsblogtwitter with a 1 in place of the I. If you want to finish out the conversation with Janey, tell us where they can find you, and tell us about your books.
Oh, gosh. I have 3 mysteries out by Kensington, and they're called Time's Up, Choked Up, and Shoot 'em Up. and I just finished this other project, which is with an editor now, and that's called Brute Force. But I don't think the title will survive the publisher, and they don't usually. So, and I also have a patriotic children's book that my illustrator's down to the last two illustrations. So I have a lot of stuff that'll probably pop this fall. So that's pretty exciting. And so my Twitter is at Janey Mack Writer, because I wasn't the first Janey Mack on there. And you can find me on Facebook under the same, and janeymack.com.
And that will all be linked in the description below. And I am currently reading Time's Up right now, and I recommend that all of you do that as well, because it's good.
Thank you.
And
so if I slip you $5, will you take out every time I said, I don't know? Because I think I probably said that a lot.
no, we do this uncut because otherwise
you
there's
don't want to edit.
no. Well, there's that, and otherwise there's the threat that I'm censoring, and I'm not
kidding.
Carlos Maza. I don't
kidding.
censor.
I'm kidding. It's that thing where you get nervous and you can feel yourself saying it. You're like, okay, I'm not going to say it. Okay, I just said it again. But you were super fun, and thanks so very much for having me on.
All right. And to the audience, if you liked what you saw here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And while you're down there looking for the links for Janey and you're hitting that subscribe button, why don't you take a second and tap that like button as well? That lets YouTube and BitChute know what people should be watching and what to promote. Once again, Ed's World is available on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. So go ahead and check us out there. You can take us on the go. And if you are on iTunes, please leave us a 5-star rating and a good review. Lastly, make sure you check out freedomscoop.com, where you can find this podcast and my solo video series. You can find the great team of the Generational Gap. Janey, I'll have to introduce you to them. Maybe you'll get to go on there. And you can find Stephen Ignoramus and his daily show and his conversation shows. And you can go and check that out as well. We are looking for writers on freedomscoop.com as editor and producer. If you would be interested in writing for Freedom Scoop, or you know somebody who would, please go ahead and reach out to me on Twitter or email me at edsblogtwitter@gmail.com, and we will get you set up with the editor-in-chief, and we'll decide what we can do for you. As we always say on this show, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Janey, you have last word.
This was just super fun.
Thanks for coming on. Take care, everyone.